Hello, Brian. Hello, Lynn. Hello, Sue. Welcome, everyone, to our second session of Voices of Palestine. Thank you so much for being here with me, Melanie St.James. And we have back again Yazan Al Saif, Fatinah Judeh, and our amazing friend Fatinah Aburosa is joining shortly. She's just coming for prayer. It is Ramadan, so thank you all. We're just going over some of the ideas and input from our last event, our last weekly webcast, and some of the questions and points were made about cultural erasure. How do we do intergenerational healing and get out of the cycle of violence? And we wanted to come back this week and continue this conversation because we really just scratched the surface with personal stories and make it really clear what has occurred, that we didn't move from apartheid into peaceful coexistence from apartheid, but rather there was peaceful coexistence between Jewish people and Arabs living in Palestine. And so from a personal perspective, we're going to come back to that. And while we're waiting for Fatinah, I would like to hand this mic over to Fatinah and Yazan. I know we're all really raw right now, like we're smiling because this is a bright light. I mean, personally, I'm pretty upset now, but I was just feeling so helpless. And I think a lot of people that started watching in October, November, they've tuned out because they feel that they can't do anything. And so thank you all for being here and being in this space and bringing joy. And the first question is, who are you? What is your name? Where are your family roots from? Where in Palestine, in occupied Palestine, is your family from? And what does humanity mean to you, or an example? Thank you.
Yazan, I went first last time, so I'll have you go first.
For sure. Thank you, Fatinah. Thank you, Melanie. So hi, everyone. My name is Yazan Al Saif, and I was actually born in Jordan, but my grandparents were the last piece of Palestine that I have here. I'm connected to it based off of them, and for the town of Tul Karam, actually, which is a border town between the West Bank as well as the occupied territory of Palestine. So we're right on that nice nice line of defense. For me, humanity is the ability for us to feel as one, to be united under one idea, under one idol, under one hope or goal. And personally, one thing that reminded me of how good humanity is was watching how the people of Gaza were able to gather and pray, even though most, if not all, of their mosques and temples have been torn down, have been erased even off of the ground, but seeing them there out in the open, just joining together for mass or prayers, even though they're sick, filled with hunger, tired, sleepless, and just filled with fear. The fact that the strength of being together or being one kind of has us in a how can I say this, in a thought of unity, or you might even call it some kind of a hive mind, where we're able to feel more connected and less affected by the external conditions that we've already had, like the fear, the hunger, and everything around us, just because we're one. So that kind of overpowers everything else that's around us and just giving us the fuel to just keep going forward and forward. So yeah, humanity is really something else.
Thank you. It's a beautiful start. Fatinah?
Thank you, everybody. So my name is Fatinah Judeh, as you guys know. Thank you for everyone who is joining us. Ramadan Kareem. If there's anyone that's joining us that's fasting. So for me, so my family is from the West Bank, Ramallah, Turmusaya, a village called Turmusaya. What is humanity? There's just so much, there's so much to that word, right? And I would say especially as a Palestinian, right? Like that word has always struck me, right? So in thinking about what it is, if we look closely, like right at the heart of Palestine, I think we find a powerful answer. So to me, it's about resilience. It's about empathy. It's about love, right? It's about our commitment to one another. And like listening to my father, right? And just in general, when I would go visit Palestine, just listening to all the stories, right? Like what stood out to me is that, our stories weren't just about getting by, which really, for me, is reminiscent of the human story, right? Our stories are about deep connections. They're about lifting each other up. They're about overcoming the odds together. There's this quote, and I want to get this quote right. Viktor Frankl, who was a Holocaust survivor, he once said, everything can be taken from a man, but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. And in thinking about this question and reflecting on just the horrific genocide that we've seen unfold in Gaza, and it's really made its way into the West Bank now, like what that tells me that it's about, like, even when you are at that moment of death, it's about that unbreakable spirit, right? And when I think about that, I think about the collective experiences and hopes of humanity, right? I think about pursuit of freedom, our fundamental right and our desire to be free and to live with dignity and to live with purpose and to live with meaning. And so I very much on this day, and thinking about this question, I'm constantly thinking about our shared story. I think our shared collective story as humans and how and what we're going to do, right? Like I'm constantly thinking about, I was like, what type of world are the human beings of the future going to inherit? I'm constantly thinking about that. And I just can't shake this notion of that story that I tell you guys about, that deep connection, the lifting each other up, like what Yazan was talking about, overcoming odds, and how we can leverage those stories of hope to forge a path forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Fatinah. And welcome to more of our participants in the audience. Thanks so much, Didi, for being here. Hello, Lauren. Fatinah, you're such an inspiration to me. I see that in your leadership with Unmute Humanity, and I'm learning from you. It's beautiful. You're showing up for your people and humanity, and
It means a lot to me. Thank you.
yeah, it's really
easy to feel
inspiring. I don't know
stuck.
how you're holding a lot. You're holding a lot. I want to make sure that we really open up this topic and dig into what that means. As most of those listening probably know, regardless of whether you have a Jewish Israeli family or whatever, this idea of us or them, and the fear, this idea that they're out to get us and therefore they must be contained, right? Is really at the root of this violence being permitted, whether or not because those feelings are actually why it's happening, or that's the official story that allows the powers that be to get away with it. So just to see what's really behind this idea that, because I grew up, I mentioned in last week that I grew up with a Persian Jewish side of the family, and what I would hear during the intifadas are that, the Palestinians are suicide bombing and they're out to get us, basically. And I still see it a lot in the posts. It's just incredible, even in the mainstream media. What do you have to say about this idea that kids in occupied Palestine or all Palestinians hate Jews, and that they're taught to hate Jews, and that that's part of the curriculum? Can you both speak to that?
Maybe I can go first. So I can even provide it with some personal experience, to be honest. Like starting out, we would know that first of all, we are one of the Abrahamic people, which means the people of the book, like the Christians, the Jews, and the Arabs. So personally, I've never been taught to hate a Jew, and if I mistakenly said it, or anyone that I know, we would actually be corrected. Like we would be reprimanded, said, okay, no, that's not a Jew. What you mean is a Zionist, like a person who is uh, um, occupying the land and taking away what belongs to someone else. So the idea itself is not about um, like an Arab or a Muslim or a Christian or whatever versus a Jew, because at the end, we're all brothers. Like I'm pretty sure they predated Muslims, so I'm pretty sure as a person of Semite descent, we're all interconnected and linked. At the end, we even have them as our cousins, as we say. So the fact that we hate Jews should not really be coming. It would be more of a misinformation that's being used up by different kind of people in order to justify something else. But again, like in schools, from our parents or from even anyone else, it has never been like this. Jews are our brothers, but those who are occupying or stealing the land or killing the people, those, let's say, Zionists, or let's say the people who are up to no good, are the ones that we are not aligned with.
Thank you, Yazan. I just wanted to build on what Yazan said. I mean, I'm Palestinian. I've been to Palestine, had the privilege of going to Palestine so many times. My parents made a point to do that during our summers, and I can tell you that it's Sahyuni. The word for Zionism is Sahyuni, right? The focus was on Zionism. It was specifically on the Israeli occupation forces, the occupying forces. In fact, I had family in Palestine that had friends on the Israeli side, right? There were some that would get these special visas to work, and I knew people that would work on when I say the Israeli side, like, think of like past the separation wall, right? And they very much like, even like, for example, during Eid, they would go and they would give them treats for our holiday. So we had incredible, like very friendly relations. It was specifically on occupation. There is no, I'm not living in Gaza, but I can tell you that that's not, as a Palestinian, children are certainly not taught to hate Jews. I was not taught to hate Jews. Like Yazan said, in Arabic, it's Ahl al-Kitab, right? The people of the book who did precede us, right? Preceded Islam. And so that, again, it's just, these are tools of propaganda that Zionists are using to detract from the occupation, the violent occupation, from our ethnic displacement, and from our ongoing genocide, right? This is why this is a lot just misinformation that's being thrown out. I can tell you, I have family in Palestine, obviously Palestinian family, friends here, and there's no focus on Judaism. A lot of my dearest friends are Jewish. It's on Zionism specifically. In fact, I would argue that there are Jews in Israel. You've seen how violently the IOF are treating the Jews in Israel who are opposing what's happening in Gaza, right? Like they've also been assaulted violently. I'm talking, you know, Jews who are opposing what Israel is doing currently. And so it's, again, it's just another attempt to gaslight and another attempt to misinform a public that is uninformed because so much money is being spent on the propaganda. Like, I can't tell you how much money. I mean, I was just reading an article earlier today. I can't give you a figure because I want to get it right, but I know that I can tell you tons of money. You know, you've heard of Hezbollah. Everybody has heard of that, the persuasion that they use. That is for misinformation, right? So it's basically, it's this sort of ongoing attempt to weaponize generational trauma for Jews and the Holocaust, which is, it's really sickening, right? And as evidenced by the support of If Not Now, you know, we have a lot of Jewish brothers and sisters who continue to support Palestinian liberation. And, you know, JVP, which is Jewish Voices for Peace, we are united. Like the Palestinian liberation movement, like we work side by side with a lot of Jewish organizations who are fighting against the same occupying forces that we've been fighting for over 75 years.
Thank you. And I wanted to thank you so much. It's pretty crazy stuff. And the Hezbollah conversation is a really big one. That also ties into the gaslighting and the stories that were created. We had in our recent Unmute Humanity meeting, I think somebody mentioned that the rape case was actually something that did happen, but it happened to Palestinians in another war, and then it was recycled. That looked really fishy to me when it first came out, and before the debunking articles were published by The Intercept, Yes magazine. I mean, very Jewish intellectual people are looking at this and debunking it. These are not Jewish hate organizations. But yeah, some really good journalism came out, and it's just extraordinary, the scope of the lies that have come out. Some people have said, you know, you're having exceptionalism against Israel. But the truth, one might say, is, you know, what about the exceptionalism for Israel to do whatever they want? And, you know, like two laws broken by Iraq, you know, they basically get completely destroyed. Like, I don't know if you've looked at the employment rates in Iraq, but that was a somewhat stable country, and now it's literally, you never hear about it. I mean, it's basically gone. Anyway, I'm getting a little bit emotional about all this. Like when we talk about the lies and the propaganda, and how, I mean, watching the comments is just, it's really hard to unbrainwash people. So it's 75 years. On September 21st, 1976, I believe, there was actually a bill at the UN that was claiming, or, you know, saying Zionism is a racist ideology and working to ban it. And as an example of the amazing investment and the work that's been done, now Zionism, if you speak against it, it's actually state law in Texas. If you speak against Israel, you could lose your job in the government. Like, it is incredible. The International Holocaust Memorial Museum, maybe it's just national, but it's some big name of the memorial. They've actually created the definition of anti-Semitism that includes any statements against Israel. And so we've gone from 1976, from it being claimed, you know, by the majority of nations as a racist agenda or ideology, to it being protected you know, along the likes of something that would be racist. So this is a massive gaslighting that humanity has suffered, particularly Americans, for obvious reasons. Anyway, I don't want to go on and on. I know we had some other huge subjects to get into. Yes, which would be ah, hold on. Speaking of, yeah, so on that point, I mean, I would like to give it back to you, Fatinah or Yazan. Um, Fatinah, you're in the US, and can you think of an example of that kind of erasure, or the not being able to be Palestinian?
I mean, there's just like so many examples growing up, just like as evidence, you know, by the fact drawing back to what I had said last time, right? About like it wasn't until just these past 6 months that something got activated within me. And I didn't realize like how indoctrinated I became, that, you know, that you have just sort of like, we have the occupation and they're in power and control. And here us, you know, Palestinians were right here. And that sort of duality and that way of like framing what was happening, but I accepted it. Now, I mean, I was always an activist, but like there was still sort of this acceptance of it. And here, every time I'd mention Palestine, I would like censor myself and say Israel, like even the way I was framing it, like I didn't feel comfortable showing up completely for myself. And I have had, been employed, without getting into specific details, where that part of my background like was not acknowledged, right? And it's because I think it's because of the propaganda machine, I'm going to call it, when it comes to what the word Palestine has become over the years, right? What it means to be Palestinian, what it's equated with. And, you know, I think a lot about like whenever I get confronted by Zionists, one thing that they would always tell me is that you're an Arab, you're not a Palestinian. And I literally been told Palestine does not exist. What Palestine are you referring to? And it's funny because I have this globe, I'm looking at it. I know you guys can't see it, but I have a globe that I'm looking at that I got from a vintage store. So for those who, you know, like a vintage store that sells like, you know, vintage item, meaning very, very old items. And I got so happy when I saw it because I get emotional thinking about this, because I was like, oh my God, it says Palestine, like so much, even though I know, obviously I'm educated. I know there was a Palestine, but it was so nice to get acknowledged and validated in that way because, you know, when I was born in Puerto Rico and then my family moved over here and, you know, to California, and totally I went to school where that was not acknowledged, right? They wouldn't accept my Palestinianness, right? It was more digestible, even though it's colonized Puerto Rico, for me to say I was born in Puerto Rico. They're like, oh, you're Puerto Rican. I was like, no, that's not what I said. I'm not Puerto Rican. I'm Palestinian, but I'm Puerto Rican born, right? And so anyway, looking at this globe and seeing Palestine, and I remember I was with my nieces and I'm like, look, Aya and Selma, they're like, oh yeah, Palestine. I'm like, I never want you to forget that we existed, because this globe that I have predates 1948. And so that just lets you know, like this sort of like the erasure that's happened. And this is why when people say you Arabs, no. Although we share a common language, right? Arabs as a category, Palestine is its own sort of like, it was its own land, right? Its own sort of region of the world. And there is nothing that even the most powerful propaganda tool can take that away from us. I want to read a quote. I've been reading this book. I was just sharing this with Yazan earlier. Dr. Rifat Al-Arir, please check him out. He's amazing. He's a well-known poet, writer, educator in Gaza. He was assassinated by the Israeli occupation forces in December. It was very traumatic for me because I had been following him. He starts off this book, Gaza Writes Back, and I'm going to kind of touch on this a little bit later on. But the premise behind this book is really about, like, notice how he wrote that, Gaza Writes Back. Because our way of fighting back against this propaganda machine, against this military complex that is doing everything in their power to erase us, not only by breaking our bones, not only by obliterating our body parts to pieces through this the most sophisticated weaponry, not only by destroying our museums and our archives, not only by going after, they've been doing this for a very long time. There was an activist, I live in the city of Santa Ana. There was even an activist here that was, assassinated. Alex Oda, you guys can look into that, his assassination here. And they built like a little statue of him actually right in front of the library. But going back to my story, he did this. And this was one of the last books actually he published before he was assassinated. As a way of sort of capturing our stories. And because when I talk about resistance, this is what I mean. We resist by memorializing our stories. We resist by resisting our occupiers' attempt to erase us. You know, there's a lot of people in Gaza that say, we remain steadfast. You can obliterate Gaza to rubble, all of Palestine. We're going to remain. And so this quote from Chinua Achebe, a Nigerian novelist, I want to just kind of, because he starts off his book with this: storytellers are a threat. They threaten all champions of control. They frighten usurpers of the right to freedom of the human spirit, which, going back to like my, the organization or the group that I'm a part of, my comrades, Unmute Humanity, this is why we're tackling media bias. This is why we're all about the truth. We're all about the whole truth, because this is the occupiers, the colonizers' way to erase us. Because they're smart. They're not thinking about now. They're thinking about 100 years from now. But what they don't realize are generations of us that are also thinking about 100 years from now. Right? So I don't know if I answered the question, but I think kind of that's what's resonating for me in what you asked, is that I want to read one more from him. These are his words, Dr. Rafat Al-Arid. Stories and narratives, part of every human gathering, enable people to make sense of their past and relate it to their present. They can be the main thread attaching them to their part, and they can present the form of a dream yet to be fulfilled. Palestinians in particular have grown to cherish and to seek stories. And then he goes on to say, storytelling is itself a major theme of some stories in the book, because the writers know well that stories outlive every other human experience, which is why I ask on every ally and every Palestinian, we all need to show up completely Palestinian, because our biggest way, our most powerful form of resistance is through our stories.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Yazan.
No, I'm just saying that's actually really amazing, as you just mentioned, Melanie. And the words, they do speak for us, for themselves. Even if we're talking about people like back in the old ages, back when we did not have a writing system, everything was just like moved generation by generation through word, through hymns, through songs, through literature. Well, I'm not sure about current literature at that point, but it was just building the ability for people to just, oh yeah, remember this land, these people, this thing is what we care about, the most about. Keep it in your heart, keep it in your mind. And if you're able to spread it by your voice, then that would be amazing. And as always, our ability to even fight back, it can be with words, it could be with the pen, writing and talking, or with force, which has recently been, to be honest, everything after World War II is just, that's when we realize, okay, we screwed up. This is too much. Force is not the right tool to settle our claims, settle our differences. Because, I mean, come on, we've been here for God knows how long, like plus 3,000 years, 4,000 years. The fact that we still have to resort back to force is just something that can't be comprehended, to be honest. Even knowing that now we can translate for people who live on the other side of the continent so easily, yet still have such territorial claims and differences. Yeah, I would just say that the words themselves, they can just go higher and higher than anything that can set us apart, so that we can all get back and unite together. So really nice words, Fatinah.
Same to you, Yazan. Totally agree with everything you said.
Thank you. Melanie.
My words were lost. We have somebody popped in from our audience, in the Q&A, Marie Boucher, who is a lecturer, a rabble rouser, a poet, an amazing ally in all things just and beautiful in Monterey, California. And she writes, "Bless your hearts. I appreciate your definition of resistance, allied with writing and storytelling. I am working on a poetry anthology dedicated to Palestinians and the lives lost, especially the poets, creatives, and children. A dedication to all lives and keeping their stories alive." And you are, Marie. That is exactly, thank you. We cannot crush these stories, and humanity is watching now. And I don't even want to ask how bad does it have to get. It's Thank God there are so many Palestinians that are in the diaspora that we know, that we see, that we love, that we know better. We know that this is BS. So these stories will live on through allies like Marie and your own stories that will continue. And I feel that we have awoken as a storm of actual humanity. I mean, this is unmute humanity, and the humanity that's been asleep in all of these communities. Like, nobody's happy to just look away. People are a lot more aware of what's going on outside of the United States, all of Central and Latin America, because they are not blind to imperialism. I actually know Marie and many other amazing people who were angels for her when she was fighting cancer and passed away a couple years ago. I want to mention Jan Black, speaking of imperialism, because she wrote 14 of her own books and co-authored another 15, mostly about Latin America and politics, and specifically related to Western and American imperialism. One of her books was actually blacklisted and banned by the CIA. It was called The U.S. Penetration of Brazil. Jan passed away a couple of years ago, and I was really grateful to be by her side. She was my most influential professor at the Monterey Institute. And if she were alive today, she would be rabble rousing for you. But because she was my professor, I'm also aware. I also have an international relations degree, and my professors were they were expats. They were expats from India, expats from Brazil, Americans who know what's going on around the world. And they looked at me like I was retarded if I would say the official narrative. Like, if I didn't know, they'd be like, "You don't know?" So yeah, people around the world are a lot more aware than the US. So if you get your eyes on this video, look at the foreign news and talk to people, because I mean, even now, this media web that's kind of like in the UK, even BBC has been biased. Anyway, I don't want to keep talking about it too much. We do have some pretty key issues to get back into, and I wanted to bring forth, because it is a hot topic. We actually, with the Global Summit, we put out a post talking about the one state solution after our last meeting, where Yazan was saying, yeah, one land where everyone can be invited to live in peace, right? And why is that so radical? Like, we have been hearing about the two-state solution over and over and over. Question one, what two-state solution? What border? And as that has been just like, yeah, we're going to get there, we're going to work it out. This entire people has been living in a prison. And then the people in the West Bank have been treated like the Native Americans. I mean, having their land stolen out from under them with arms from the government. 3% of the violent crimes of the colonial settlers are prosecuted. And even then they get out. I mean, they're basically, it's like, oh, we got a few of them. I mean, we're talking, it is state policy. So the thing is, like, people sometimes mention, oh, it's not Israel. It's just like there's that far right. No, this has been the people who are making those policies are part of a democracy for a long time. And so, now I think it's just gotten worse. I think back in the 70s, there were probably more conscious resistors. But I think the people there now have been brainwashed by what Israel is saying that the Palestinians do. They have really taught the kids to hate and want to kill them all. And if you look at this video of this woman singing a lullaby while there's bulldozers crushing bodies, it takes somebody to be very indoctrinated, to be so disconnected with themselves to do that. So, okay, back to you both. By the way, Fatinah was not feeling well. She has high blood pressure and has a stomach ache, and so she's taking the evening to rest. And this can be a pretty intense conversation. So I
Right.
support her to do that, and we'll have her back soon because there were some things I would love to hear about her experience from Inarwa, related to what the daily reality is for people that they're helping. And speaking of UNRWA, by the way, when I was living in Jordan, I learned that I just have to say this because otherwise I'll probably forget. It was created before the right of refugees. And so it's kind of like this whole bureaucratic BS that they don't even treat Palestinian refugees as refugees. There's like some weird little loophole that they only have this one agency instead of having other refugee rights. And so it's another apartheid. Yeah, it's okay. So if we could outline, like, we talked just maybe this whole middle of what happened between the Nabka all the way to the present. It's a lot of history. There's a great many books and references for that. Do not listen to history.com. They omit huge, huge, huge parts of history. It's not neutral. If anyone has recommendations for books about Palestinian history that do seem factual, by the way, bias is not only picking one side, it's picking one set of lives over another. So when people say that, like, oh, this group is biased, when you are wanting to treat lives, if you really believe that if you're not racist, you will favor Palestinians. It's really that simple. Like, this is another gaslighting. Like, no, you don't need to be equal. You need to look at based on the actions, based on the crimes, the actual racism. That's a racist, violent regime. Therefore, we must treat it as such. If you treated your kids the way the world is treating the two, one would want to kill the other. But the difference is Palestinians have been really, really nice. I mean, the right of return march, how many people were blown up, like, anyway, okay, it's not my, I'll do some other recording. You guys just get me pumped up. So
There was a
apartheid.
question
Yes.
in the chat. I want to make sure we answer it.
Yes.
The question is, and I'll have Yazan start. When did you learn your family's history, and at what age have you written them down? I'll start with Yazan. Sorry, I just want to make sure that.
Please
Yeah,
go for it.
sure. Like what's nice about, well, of course, being Palestinian and being a human after all, is that our parents, our grandparents are happy to share with us their stories and our heritage. And coming from a working family where I would have to spend most of my time with my grandparents, um, especially my grandmother, uh, she was so nice. She couldn't really write a lot, but she made up for that in words, where she would tell me where she used to do things, where she would get, let's say, her crops, where she used to go to the field, how she used to go and treat her neighbors, and all of that would do, like they would do through songs. Especially for the ladies, they have like their own their own like musical style of singing and like hymning together. So just knowing about that from that age just gives you some kind of a motive, as Fatinah just said like 6 months ago. It kind of unlocks something within you, saying that, my God, this kind of history, this kind of tradition, it has to be developed somehow, somewhere. It does not just get created in one day, because each part of Palestine and the world, of course, each kind of people within the same territory, within the same land, within even the same block of, let's say, flats, they would have their own special, let's say, nitty-gritties here and there. And that's nice about, like, that's really nice, because that's what makes us humans. And for me to know my heritage is such with such, let's say, strength and such diversity, it just keeps me wanting to learn more and more about it. So by doing that, I just been keen on reading more and finding more stuff about how things developed, how the people of Palestine helped others, even in Europe, back when World War I started, back in World War II, because at the end, everyone's just looking for a safe place. Let it be the Arabs, let it be the Europeans, let it be the Americans, people in Asia. As long as it's a safe place, we just want to go there. We just want to coexist. We just want to live, but not at the expense of other people. That's the main part of it. And personally, I would hopefully keep pulling my part in it and adding my weight wherever I would go, just to make sure that as humanity we can make it through. Thank you.
Amazing question. Thank you so much, Diane. Fatinah, did you want to answer that?
Yeah, so it's so interesting that you asked that question. Dan, is that who asked the question? Yeah? Okay. I've obviously always been fascinated by my sort of what I consider my origin story and my family's origin story. And I remember when I was a kid, we used to visit, Palestine. I'll always call it, it's Palestine to me. It will forever be Palestine. I would ask a lot of questions, right? I was always so curious. It was just so interesting, right? All the checkpoints, and just the entire experience just was so different than any other place that I had visited, like I think in the world, right? But it really wasn't until these past 6 months that I found myself clinging to the stories. I'm not kidding you, because I had this moment in October, end of October. I just sat there in my car after work, and I was just so sad, because I'm like, I took it for granted. It's because I didn't make an effort to write down these stories. Going into Dan's question, I didn't memorialize it. Growing up, very similar to Zen, I grew up in a household where we would sit around in a circle. And if I care, I'd love to share something later on about that, but I'll talk about that later. But we would sit around in a circle, and my family would clap. Women would clap. You know what I'm talking about, Zen? And they would sing. I'd pay attention to the songs. And I was like, oh, it's the same song. There goes my mom again singing. It really wasn't until this year that I'm like, I'm going to pay attention to what they're singing. What are they saying? Like, what are the lyrics? What are these songs of resistance? What does that even mean? Right? and like just the various sort of like cultural traditions that are like that find their way into these songs. And I started paying more attention, like everything. I was just like awake, asking my dad a lot of questions. I did not know, I'm just ashamed to say it. I knew my grandfather died. My great grandfather died in 1936, but I didn't know we never found his body. I didn't know that. Why is that relevant? Because look at all the horrific stories we're hearing from Gaza. I mean, we saw you talk about that lullaby. I'm still disturbed by that. I've not been able to sleep. Seeing those bodies, and we don't know, they're probably completely innocent. They were executed. And there they are singing songs as they bulldoze their bodies. That could have been my grandfather, my great grandfather in 1936. So now I find myself clinging to every story, anything. I wear all these necklaces that I have, you know, from Palestine. I work for a very conservative organization. I wear my keffiyeh every single day, right? That's my way. And I am now going back into the story of Gaza Writes Back, Gaza Fights Back, but Gaza Writes Back through their stories. I find myself doing that because it wasn't until I sat there for 6 months watching them assassinate journalists, you know, writers, poets, singers, doctors, nurses, civilians in the most horrific ways, that the threat of our potential erasure just really, like, for the first time, I'm like, I now know what this means. I now know my mom cries. Growing up, my mom would always cry because she's like, I wish I raised you guys in Palestine. I wish, because she feels like the more generations, like, you know, I'm not married, I don't have any kids, but I have siblings that are married and have kids. And she's like, just like the generations are being born here, and she feels like they're being fooled. They're like, they're becoming more sort of like, what's the word that I want to use? Like just more degrees of separation from our land, from our, you know, from our home. And that's always so hard for her, which is why growing up, that's why I do speak Arabic and I do read and write Arabic. And I'm so grateful to my parents, because that was their way of preserving a piece of the Palestine that they were deprived because of lack of economic opportunity. And obviously they would have been limited to living in the village. Well, what are they going to do? Which is why they immigrated. And so to your question, Dan, I'm doing that now. I didn't do it before. There's something very monstrous, for lack of a better word. There really are no words in the human language to really describe how I'm feeling right now, based on everything we've seen and we've witnessed, that we've had to bear witness to. But because our erasure seems so like it can happen, I'm seeing it. Now I find myself like I'm showing up 100%. I'm doing it not in just like how I show up and how I interact with people. Definitely writing down stories I call my dad all the time and I'm like, describe this, describe, why is it that you don't have your Palestinian passport anymore? How did you end up with I'm asking all these questions, and my dad's like, why are you asking me all these questions? Because I took it for granted. And I see why my mom would always cry that she didn't get to raise us there, and that she, you know, we can't. It's difficult, by the way, just FYI, for people who don't know, for Palestinians living in the diaspora, don't think that you can just pick up your things and leave. That's not the way it works. They give you a maximum of a 3-month visa. My mom, at any given time, she could only go for 3 months, and they try to extend it and they give her a hard time and she has to leave. So they feel like they're forever stuck in like this weird space that they don't really, I mean, they're happy for the opportunities that they've been given by the US, but like just they'll never feel at home. They will always feel like strangers in a foreign land. So to honor my family, to honor my people, to honor Palestine, like that's why like I am making a concerted effort to just record and record and record. And why I love, again, I'm going back to this notion of unmute, and like why this group of comrades, why we got together, right? Is because we want to make sure that these stories, that even after we go away, that they persist, right? That the truth is what sustains like moving forward. That is the thread, because we can't allow that our erasure to happen. The erasure of the Palestinians will lead to the erasure of all other people that are subjugated in the world. And so this is why I see that our liberation cause is really about the liberation of humanity in many ways. It's emblematic of that for me.
Really amazing words, Fatinah. Just can't get it in a clearer way. And that drive in us is, again, what really makes us part of this planet, part of the human race. Like being able to change and having the mindset to just say, okay, maybe I was not doing the right things, or maybe there is a better way of doing something. With that open mindset, we can really achieve everything. We can just go from being completely isolated to just being one with everyone else around us, which is really something I wish we would reach, to the point that we can really utilize every human, every idea, every action here on Earth for the better good. Not for one person, not for one people, but for all of humanity. Really, maybe one day, hopefully.
Yes.
Mm.
And
That is
Melanie,
an exponential change attitude, Yazan. And that to me is what this is about right now. What's been going on for thousands of years, like you were saying about stories living on. We're coming up to the top of the hour in like 8 minutes. I feel like we were just kind of getting started. I'd love to go to the top of the hour if we could do that. But when we talk about, first of all, like the stories that live on, people are still making references to the Rubicon and Julius Caesar. It's like those stories are what our archetypes have attached to. That's what's dominating our world right now. And so this is a new story that is being lived and created right now. And so if we're going to get on a hero's journey of like the humanity's hero's journey to be a hero, this is, it's, thank you, Israel. Thank you for coming and being the villain. Sorry, like for those who identify with Israel, we all have the villain inside. I can be an ass and I hate it and I see it. Like we're all flawed, but thank you for representing that action of, you know, and it's the wounded, right? It's the victim that's coming out and causing pain. It represents so much of our collective suffering throughout history. But the new story that we can tell, and what's so incredible, and we're going to be kicking off a video campaign that's why Palestine and why now, right? And what this means to me, I've been looking at how to, you know, similarly, I love you guys for caring about humanity. You're not into the tribal politics. We're not, you see this, like it's so much bigger. And those of you that are here, so this, if we keep doing things the way we've been doing them, we won't have a future to look back at. It's that simple. And now we have 8 billion people on the planet. So this idea that it's only Palestine, it's only, you know, these people, it won't affect me. Like this is exactly the crisis point. This is the time when humanity needs to say, this is can't work. Just like Greta Thunberg is like, hey, climate's real. I mean, this is the most acute, pivotal time to say, oh my God, like we just because, you know, that's the excuse, like, oh, well, the US did it, and you know, we did that to Vietnam. It's like, yeah, that's why it's got to stop. How did that work out? Anyway, I don't want to go on and on, but you see, this is, yeah, you do see, and thank you for seeing that. What would a just future look like to each of you, to leave it with that this evening?
do you be our guest for now, Fatinah?
So you could go ahead, Yazan.
Okay. Maybe the word just can really depend on what kind of inputs we're adding, and justice itself might not really be sufficient for everyone. So again, to be honest, I don't know why, but my process thinking would just kick in all the time. So for me, I would just say, as long as we can reach a happiness utility, if I may say, in each person, or in each productivity, or in each, let's say, outcome of what a person is, to provide them with the fair chance of being who they are, developing into something that they would like to be, and allowing them not to put all of their effort into just resisting the fact that everyone else wants them to be eradicated. That alone will enable us to reach such potential. So instead of us just trying to prove that, okay, guys, we do have a problem here, if we all just understand each other and say, yes, we do see your point, we do understand it, let's work together on it, that's when I would say some form of justice will be developed. So for me, as the moment we reach that point, we can develop together as one human race, and that's justice.
And for me, I just want to get a clarifying question. Are you saying like just word in general, or just world for the Palestinians? Just want to get a clarifying
For all.
question. For all? That's what you guys meant?
You know what?
Okay.
It's I think the way that Yazan answered that was like, how do we have justice for the world, right? Like, what is the path to peace? And we say there's no peace without justice. So that was a very there are very few in that question. We might need next conversation or a future conversation look more at these. I was kind of leading into state solution, what that would look like, but I do think that would take at least another hour. So Yazan, I love what you, yeah, listening to each other and being in this human team. That's a really great point. But yeah, maybe we started with what is humanity to you, and what is justice? Whatever resonates with you, like
I think for me,
justice
like,
for how can we, what would be justice for the Palestinian people? You know, that's huge. But yeah, if there's anything that resonates with you to
I just
say.
can't, to me, when I think of that word, I think that again, when they say like no one's free until like Palestine is free, right? And I think for me, when I think of justice, it has to be a world where there's no occupation, right? Where there's no like forced starvation, right? Where there's no there's no notion of genocide, right? That's not existing, that we would all come collectively together of any country, no matter, put Palestine, Israel aside, right? That no matter what the country, that we would come together as humanity to stop that, right? And so, you know, obviously it's a world where we acknowledge one another's dignity, when we acknowledge one another's story, right? Like, I think that's so important. Amplify our culture, our heritage, the power of our collective experiences, where we, you know, I keep thinking about like the Jewish brothers and sisters and how they've been such incredible allies for Palestinians, right? So anyway, that's what I think about. I think of that. When one falls, everyone falls. So I think of a world where that's manifested. If I fall, everyone falls. Where that's where we as a humanity, we think of as a people, we get to that point in our existence.
Thank you. Oh, I feel like we're just getting it. Thank you so much. Thank you, Zan. Thank you, everyone. And just so we have it on the recording, thanks again to our audience, and thanks so much, Didi, for pulling up this important info. Inshallah, Marie says. And yes, thank you for your words, Fatinah and Yazan. The struggle is emblematic of the liberation of all humanity. And we just need to stay in our peace place. Not only that, but thank you, Yazan, for that reminder and let us not become what we're not so happy with, right? And for the note for Jan Black's legacy, it is alive, and this is from Marie, and her posthumous work, Black's Law, is now available, so we can look that up. And it's all of these anecdotes and, you know, kind of laws about like grassroots development, and it's brilliant. Like big money means big thieves, and, you know, it's very on point. And thank you, Dee Dee, for pulling up the book. Jan Nippers Black, University of Penn Press book, U.S. Penetration of Brazil, is available on the internet. It's been so long since she wrote that the CIA has taken it off of the list. So all good. And we look forward to seeing more of you, many of you, and perhaps new voices as well next Sunday at noon Pacific time. Melanie St. James signing out. Your dog is very cute, Fatinah.
I know, he kept barking. Sorry, everyone. Bye, say hi. Say hi.
Any last words before I turn off the recording and say goodbye to everybody?
Salam, thank you for your time, everyone.
Thank you all. And again, if you believe it, you can really make it.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you. Heart to all. Peace.
Thank you.
Bye.